G'day, I'm MPA, otherwise known as Michael Adams, and I work for Waves. I'm the dude you were just hearing from the middle of the internet. So I'm going to be here in a minute with Chris Lord-Alge. I've got him live from his studio in Tarzana, California. As I said, please do ask your questions in the area underneath the screen where I am right now. I understand there's a lot of you. I understand there's a lot of questions. And I also understand that the internet sometimes can be a bit finicky, as there are an awful lot of live events happening right now. So please, if something freezes, understand that the best thing to do is try and refresh your page, that end. I know from looking on my screens, everything is streaming out really, really powerfully from this end. So without further ado, please let me bring on Chris Lord-Alge. Chris, are you there?
Greetings, Michael. How are you? The man, the myth, the legend, MPA. Thank you for having me aboard. Welcome, everyone. Welcome, world, to Tarzana, the home of CLA. Okay, so he is right here with me today. Whoops, wrong side. Hey, how's it going there, buddy? All right, are you ready to rock? Yes, we are. So welcome to my studio. Mix LA. I am so socially distanced, I don't even exist. I'm like a vapor trail. So, my studio is less than a mile from my house, so it's kind of part of my house. So this is where I live. And, since what we do is sit behind a screen or sit behind a board or whatever you have, we're spending most of our time away from people anyway. So when this whole thing happened, the only difference was, where's all the traffic and where'd all the people go? So look, I know it's a very strange time. This is a very strange event we're happening, okay? Number one, I want to thank Waves for inviting me to come on board and talk to everyone. And I'm thanking all of the millions of you that came on board to hear me today. I mean, thousands.
No, Chris, it's millions. It's definitely millions.
It's millions. Okay, so look, I am happy to have you all on board and join me in my control room. This is where I spend most of my time. Music is my life. I love being here. I love the gear. I love this. I love working with music. But yeah, in the last couple of months, it's been strange for a lot of people. But here's some advice, okay, from the man that has two things to worry about. I worry about what I can do and not what I can't do. So here's some advice for all of you. Now, I don't watch the news. I avoid it. I don't worry about how much toilet paper or how much paper towels or supplies I have. What I do focus on is, hey, you know what? What can I do when things have slowed down or, there's more to clean up? I focus on what have I done in the last year? What about the sessions I forgot about? Let me go back and make sure the artists I worked with are taken care of, okay? So what have I done? I've contacted all my clients. I talk to all my artists. I make sure that I dotted my I's, crossed my T's, and make sure that they're 1,000% happy, okay? Right? I make sure that all my relationships are back and connected, and I need you all to do that. A lot of my friends are like gloom and doom. No, this is like reboot your career, reboot your life. I know that all of you out there, whether you just started 2 months ago or been at this for 50, 60 years like I have, maybe 80 years, this is the time for you to stay in contact and focus on what's the next chapter, okay? So I'm trying to encourage you guys, women also, all of you, okay? I know many great women engineers, okay, and many talented people, songwriters, producers, writers, anybody who sits and creates music. This to me is a godsend of free time to finish all those loose ends, okay? And with Waves, there's some great tools, and I've been with these guys for now hundreds of years, okay?
Hundreds.
Yeah, well, okay, hundreds of days. No, a long time, and I consider them family. So the tools that we've created and the things that we do together are really without the best in the business. So it's time to go through your toolbox, clean it out, make sure the stuff that you have is what you use. I know that most of you have Pro Tools rigs that look like closets with junk. There's boxes of shoes and stuff you're never going to wear. Go through your plugin selections. If you haven't used it in the last year, dump it. Only focus on the tools you need. That's how I look at it. When I pull that list down and see the armada of plugins, it's so annoying. I don't want to deal with it. Okay. So use this time to be focused and creative. Everyone I've worked with, I've tried to make them encouraged to be creative.
So, Chris, one thing, it's like I remember you told me this once. You said use times where you have a gap of time to actually spend some time and go through plugins that you're not sure about and see if they can be added to your tool list before you get rid of them. It's like that's one of the reasons I love your presets, because your presets that you have in things like the Mix Hub are really great starting points for people.
That's why I made them. So when you have time, look, I found the funny thing, since I got back from New York, I think it was March 9th, okay? I've been in here every day, 12 hours a day. You know why? Because whether there's files showing up or edits to be made or things, the work was flowing because people are home making music, right? And even when I didn't have that, I said, you know what? This gear needs some help. This console needs some help because it's pretty old. And everything I work on needs some help. Michael, you have a question?
No, I'm good. I'm totally good. So
he's waving at me. So
no. Sorry, it's like I was just adjusting my microphone. So let's take a look. Let's take a look at what I mean. Right now on your screen, you've got two plugins, both yours. Yep. Let's use this as a starting spot, and then we can see if we can get through this mix.
Okay, let's start about session organizing. Okay, so I took one of my mix sessions right here. I'm actually going to just move the plugin down here. I just took one of my sessions and peeled apart most of it and left a few tracks in there just to show you what we're doing, okay? Just to show you how it's organized, all right? So I always try to put all my mixes at the top of the screen and then start with vocals and work my way down through drums. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to give you some pointers on what you should do as far as printing, okay? So this is what I recommend for this. We're going to go right to the mix mode here, right to the mix master, okay? Here's delivery requirements that you're going to create. When you're dealing with people and dealing with artists and dealing with music, okay, we have three things to worry about. We have three formats of what we have. We have multi-tracks, we have stems, and we have mixes, okay? Remember, stems are a breakout of a mix. A mix is an opinion, all right? Let's just call a mix an opinion. A mix is your opinion of what the song should sound like today, which is 4/29/20, okay? So the stems you created today are your opinion broken out into stereo pairs, right? Makes sense? The multi-track is the master, okay? So when you're mixing from the multi-track, you're creating mixes and then creating stems, okay? So when it comes to what you deliver, I deliver 6 mixes, master mix, which if you see on the screen, this particular song went to up 7 because we did a bunch of revisions and with overdubs, okay? Now, why, Chris, why is it called up? It's an old term. You can call it mix 7. You can call it T7. You can call it whatever you want. The reason it's up 7's update. And it used to be upload because, you know, that's just my name for mixes is up. Up 1 is the first mix. Up 7 would be what, the 6th revision. So I print 6 mixes. The master mix, okay, which is whatever they approved, all right? Then a vocal up version of that master mix, okay? Then a TV track, which just means mute all lead vocals, so it's only backgrounds. Then an instrumental, that is now 4 mixes, right? The other 2 is a lead vocal stem, which is a stereo stem of exactly the lead vocal with everything on it, so it just drops right over the instrumental or whatever. And then a background of the whole thing, right? A background vocal stem of the same thing. It's all the background solo in stereo. So you can reassemble it with instrumental, lead vocal, and background vocal stem, and they can cut it and use it for other purposes. That's the 6-pack that makes sense.
Cool. So how about let's before we go on, let's just play maybe 60 seconds of this track if we can, so we can hear what we're working with.
Okay, so this is a new band. Okay, a brand new band that was brought to me that I loved, got involved with, okay? And because of the love of music, I worked with them and finished a whole record with them. This is the second song I heard from them, but this song is called Two Ways, and the band's called Tempt. This record's going to be coming out in a few months, so let's just hear a piece of this. I'll make sure my other tracks are muted. Okay. I could be a DJ. Here we are in Tarzana. It's 104 degrees out here in the valley. I'm Chris Lord-Alge, and this is 95.5 CLA. Brand new band called Tempt with their first single called Two Ways. Produced by Tempt and CLA, mixed by Chris Lord-Alge at Mix LA.
There's a bit of a Def Leppard feel to it, isn't there?
Kinda.
Yeah.
I love guitar. I'm in the 80s. I'm an 80s guy.
We both are.
Here it gets more Def Leppard, right? You know, we got guitars up here, kids. Oh, can't reach it that easily. Come on, right here. You will soon hear that on across the world and around the planet.
So that's exciting. When's this released?
I think
this is kind of like a tease, isn't it?
It's a tease. It'll be out in a month or so. And you know, it's a young band, and they do the. Here's the great thing about music: you don't have to reinvent it. They made great demos. Okay, I went in there, met with them. We went through the demos, did some changes to the demos, and I took their demos and mixed the demos because your first experience making a song is always going to be your best. So what do? We use our plugins to make it sound great, okay? And we use our tools. So, for example, let's just show you how we use some tools on this, all right? So, of course, would CLA be using other plugins? Well, he kind of uses his own plugins. You know why? Because I made them for me, and they happen to work for you. So I didn't make plugins that I'm not going to use. This plugin right here, the Mix Hub, I use it every day on every mix. It's like my go-to. People say, well, Chris, you're sitting in front of a 72-input SSL. Here's the difference, kids. This sucker is supercharged. That means it took the GUI, right, from the 80s and turned it into something that's more aggressive every which way you look at it, okay? I can add overdrive with the mic input. The EQ is super aggressive. I have 2 different flavors of limiter on it. Okay, I can easily use this output section to split stereo stuff and make it happen. But the bottom line that I find with a plugin is that every channel sounds the same. So if I put this on every track, I know that +6 at 4K is going to be exactly +6 with the same Q on every channel. You know, on my better half over here, okay, on the person I've spent my life with. Well, each channel's a little different. Old 29 might be different than 21. So that explains that. So we'll show you on this lead vocal track. I will mute the mix. And I will just move that vocal so I can see where it starts. Okay. And just play you a little bit. Okay, so if I hit Command, I can just drop these out. Here's our vocal plane.
Hot mess, shoulda guessed you're running out of time and you'll never get another one.
Let's add some EQ.
It's fair play another day, you shoulda stayed far away. Now
And
you're
now let's
the
add,
only one.
let's add old CLA 76.
Oh, let go.
Yes.
You're either with the
And then
song
the
or
finisher.
not, 'cause it's never gonna stop. Whoa, I know.
Barely tapping it.
You can feel it in yourself. It's your life.
Now, here's a typical chain that I will use. Here's why. I get to use the EQ that I like. I get to go through the plugin that I created. Of course, you see the originals are right there, okay? And then this becomes my finisher. This is only there to kind of take the peaks out of what this stuff does. Because look, I'm EQing into this. This is spanking it. And what this is doing is keeping the spanking from running away on you. So a typical chain that I use that sounds...
Hot mess, shoulda guessed you're running out of time and you'll never get another one.
With my plugin, you click on the numbers, and it just toggles it up.
Another day, you should have stayed far away.
Now, you want to see it? You want to hear it overdrive? You want to hear it overdrive? Look.
Oh, let go. You're either with us or you're
Whoa.
not, 'cause it's never gonna stop. Whoa.
It's almost like Goo Goo Goo. I am the walrus there all of a sudden.
You can feel it in yourself. It's your life.
So it's funny. People say, oh my God, the red lights are on. It's going to burn. It's going to catch on fire. I'm afraid. I'm not. I feel that the way to make plugins do something is kind of see where they blow up. Make them overdrive. Don't be afraid. Let the meter pin. The more it pins, sometimes that's the sound. But another thing you need to know is that, okay, if we look at the vocal track, okay, and we go up here to Audio Suite, right? And then I think it's in Other, we take the gain plugin, right? And we just look at, okay, what's the gain here? All right, so that's -6, okay? So as long as the vocal is between -6 and 0, your plugins are going to react properly. So, okay, -6, let's just take that track up, okay? We'll make it 6 dB up. Look at it again. Okay, now it's at what? -1. So most of my tracks, I'll try to get it -1 with a gain plugin, okay? So then I can pull this guy back, play it again, right?
Hot mess, should've guessed you're running out of time, and you'll never get another one.
This is ideal gain structure for the sound, okay? If I pull this thing down to 0 or lower, right, then
hot mess,
it's
should've guessed you're running out of time, and you'll never get another one.
I get vocal tracks from people that are like,
it's fair play
down here. I'm like, you guys have any meters on those things?
Hey, so Chris, so I have a question here from Charles.
Yes,
Charles has asked, what do you think about breaking up the frequency stage to make space for everything when you start a mix, while we're talking about vocals? And are you scooping out areas from guitars and pads, etc., to make room for those vocals?
Charles, greetings, welcome. Guess what? I have the perfect answer for you. You are overthinking this. I never do that. Why? You don't need to make room. You got to remember that the less you do that, the better the song is. Making room, no. The room is already there. I want a vocal full range. I want a bass full range. Kick drum, keyboards, okay? If I'm going to roll anything off, it's going to be right around here in the vocal, which is going to be that wind and rumble, okay? And if a keyboard has some rumble on it, that kind of, or some hiss, but no, don't scoop things out. Don't think the frequencies are like a pie and you're making room. No, it all goes together, okay? This is the biggest mistake that engineers make, is they think they need to make room in the frequency ranges for other things. No, there's room for everyone. It's a big table.
While we're still on vocals, Alex has said, would you use the SSL strip first, or would you compress first? On vocals specifically, Alex is asking about this. So I thought it was relevant while we're dealing with this vocal track.
Yeah. Well, look, if you can see over here, it's EQ, compressor, limiter. Now, the limiter to me is just a finisher. It's just there to move a dot or two because it's so fast, right? I'm always EQ compressor. So there's your question there.
Okay, and finally, while we're on vocals, Matthew wants to know, seeing as we're dealing with the lead vocal right now, do you have a philosophy on how to deal with backup vocals? Do you deal with them differently to how you deal with the main vocals?
Okay, here's a little secret sauce for you, okay? If you look down my screen here, you see I'm using the same chain for backgrounds. Okay, the first thing I do is identify, is the lead singer singing all the backgrounds? Well, then it's probably the same chain. So if you use the same chain, okay, the same EQ compression chain on all of them, guess what's going to happen? It's going to blend like nobody's business, all right? It's going to be a perfect blend, okay? Now, obviously, you're going to spread them out. Now, with backgrounds, you may take a little bit more bottom off so they take a little bit less room and don't get so woolly. But I try to look at all vocals as treating them the same because they'll blend better that way.
We got a question while we're still on vocals from Bongoat. I think I got your name right. Do you think it's always a good idea to take out the low end of a lead vocal? I find that when cutting off a vocal at a frequency higher than 7 to 80 hertz, it takes away some of its character, question mark.
Okay, so here's the best way to start is if we listen to this vocal, let's put it to flat, right? We'll just play the vocal flat here.
Hot mess.
And if it sounds woolly to you,
you're running out of time and you'll never get another one.
What around 150?
It's fair play another day. You should have stayed.
Here's the secret, okay? Because people sing really close to the mic, what happens when you get close to the mic? The closer you get, the more bottom you get. It's called proximity, right? And sometimes it's really bad if you use the wrong mic. So the first thing you do if you want to get a vocal sound is roll off bottom until it sounds clear, all right? Because since you're feeding the EQ into the compressor, it's going to bring up the clarity of the vocal. So start there, but I'm saying, you could take off 9 dB at 100, roll off 70. You can keep going down, I wouldn't roll off any higher than like 150, or you're getting into the chest of the vocal. So start there. Don't try to EQ top end around it. Get rid of the mud first.
So I have another question from Carlos. While we're talking about compression, Carlos. G'day, Carlos.
Carlos.
So Carlos wants to know if you can explain the difference between the two compressor modes on the Mix Hub. And you're the best person to do it. It's because it's on your console.
Well, let me ask. So Chris, what is the difference between those two? Okay. Well, let me show you right now. Kidding. All right. So it's very simple. Okay. And I'll bypass this limiter. I'll play his vocal, right?
Hot mess, should've guessed you're running out of time and you'll never get another one.
Okay, this style is emulating more of the console, which is more like a DBX 160. If you're familiar with that, it's very much that. And then I said, that's not enough for CLA, so boom, there goes Bluey. But you're probably going to ask, well, if you already have Bluey there, why are you using this Bluey? Right? Well, for some reason, because this is a standalone Bluey at the bottom, okay, it has a different character than the built-in Bluey. So, but I'll leave that up to you guys to find out. But look, you listen to it with this Bluey. Very similar.
Out of time and you'll never get another one.
You're going to get an 1176 sound, which is distorted and more aggressive, or you're going to get more of a 160, which is cleaner and slow attack, fixed release. So there's just two different flavors.
So another question just came up, and it's actually one while I'm looking at you in your room there. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, this facility, I think you've mentioned like it took about $6 million to build at some point in the 80s. So one of the questions, Laureen specifically asked this one, what's your feelings on now that so many people are listening on, really, really cheap headphones that came with their phone or just mono speakers? How do you adapt in this kind of, from that kind of room that you're in right now to make sure that everything is relevant to the so many very listening mediums today?
Well, you know what? Nothing has changed since for me since the early 80s. Here's why, and I want you all to think along these lines. Once you get used to how you listen to your music, once you're monitoring and you stick with the same monitoring, it doesn't matter what people are listening to it. If you have it nailed on your monitors, it's going to sound good on anything. I don't worry, is this going to sound good on a laptop? Is this going to sound good in my AirPods? Well, you know what? As long as it sounds good on what I know, I feel confident that it's going to translate globally, okay? So, yeah, everyone's listening on everything different. I mean, I trust my car, my CLA 10s, I trust my boombox. So, I just trust my ears and what I'm used to. So I wouldn't worry about that. Don't think, I got to make sure it sounds good on a laptop. Look, if it sounds good, it's going to sound good everywhere.
That's a good point. And somebody else just brought up a good point, and I'm glad they brought this up, Chris. Raris, I'm sorry if I got your name wrong, says, why are there no mute or solo buttons on the Mix Hub plugin? And that's actually a good question for anybody who's looking to understand the CLA Mix Hub.
I'm showing it right now as a channel strip because to me it's a dynamite channel strip. I gave you the option to go into bucket mode, which I'm not going to explain in just a second. But the reason it doesn't have solos or mute is because it's not a console. And that means that we have to connect to Avid. Avid does not let us connect that way because it's a plugin. We're not able to solo and mute. Believe me, I wish we could. Then it would make it more into a console. But I'm sure in the future, the future holds a lot of more cool things for you guys. But yeah, it's because Pro Tools drives the mute and solo.
It does. Okay, cool. So let's move on with a bit more of this session, Chris. I'm digging this session so far.
So we looked at some vocal stuff. I'm just going to close those guys down, right? And look, I just pulled in. I'm going to mute his vocal. I just pulled in some of the drums real quick because on something like this, I use my own kick. Okay, I use a couple of snare samples, but I'm just going to show you. Okay. I'm going to solo. This is the snare drum that came with the record, okay? And I'm just going to mute it, right? Okay, and you're like, wow, Chris, that really, you use that? See what I have to dig up on this? All right. So I have to even probably go into it, but I don't gate drums. So say I went this is what it sounds like. And I didn't care, I'm kind of like the honey badger. I really didn't, what. So I would just say, okay, Chris, what are you going to do to that? I'm going to add one of these guys, right? And I'm going to add that to help it. And I'm going to add a bunch of snares if I have to. But then I look and say, okay, what's with the kick drum? Okay, so I had my own kick drum. Pretty quick, I can get something. I just solo that kick for a second, or mute the other guys, right? Put the room in.
Oh, now we're talking.
Now listen to that room. I mean, that's, right? Is that like MIDI and kind of dark, right? But you don't be shy here, right? Right, to bring something out of it, right? Whoa, slow those cymbals down, because that's what happens when you make the room bright, right? But, he had a really deep snare, so I had to keep it, and I had to use my own. I'll bring this. And then, what are the overheads doing? Whole secret with drums, and I'm going to tell you this right now, you start compressing those overheads in rooms, you're going to end up in a world of trouble or a world of cymbals, because the biggest problem with drums is, how can I get my snare drum to sound like CLA? No, I'm kidding. Hey, how can I get my snare drum to sound like
that guy?
And everybody wants to have drums, okay? Or
question for you from Joseph.
Go, Joseph.
Question for you from Joseph. Joseph wants to know, and I'm looking at some of your drums right now. Joseph wants to know what your feeling, Chris, is on left, center, right panning when it comes to things like drums and other things in your mix.
Make it as wide as possible. You know why? Because people aren't listening in stereo. And you're probably more sensitive to the stereo aspect of it. It's personal taste. I'm really a left, right, center kind of guy. I really am. Look, if you pan a hi-hat to the right, which is audience, or left, which is drummers, the overheads are going to bring it more toward the middle or anything. So I want the toms to jump out of the corners because the whole track eats it up anyway. So go down that road.
Okay, Cesar, do you have a specific order to do the first EQ and compression adjustment of a new mix you have? Like, do you work on the vocals first, or the bass first, or the drums first? That's a good question.
Here's the secret to your question. First, you do get the rough mix in there, okay? Make sure you have all the parts. Put up all the faders, get a quick balance of the song. Get a balance that almost sounds like the song, okay? And then say, okay, where are the problems building here? Is it the drums that aren't cutting it? Is it the guitars? Is it vocals? I will usually first go after the drums and check the phase between the kick, snare, and the overheads. I will check to see if there's any problems there. How's that?
Would you call a problem muddiness? One of the things coming up on the chat right now is, how do you deal with muddy drums? And I think you just explained that, but it's like muddiness is something I find that a lot of people are having problems with when they're first starting out. So how do you deal with it?
Well, here's why you're getting muddy drums. One of the reasons why is because people aren't EQing them when they record them, right? So, but look, you get muddy drums. They're super dark, okay? Here's what you do, okay? Try to add the same amount of top end across the board and see what gets worse. If you get a ton more cymbals, it's like, okay, you know what? This snare drum's never going to be bright enough. The first thing I do with muddy drums is I start to add samples to enhance them, to make them pop through more. So, it's really hard on a rock record or pop record to get drums to just acoustic drums to sound great off the bat. You got to add some enhancement. You got to add some samples. So I really think if you start by adding samples and using those as like drawbars in an organ to give you different flavors, that's the start. When you start EQing drums, the first thing that's going to happen is like too much hi-hat, too much cymbals, too much leakage, too much crap.
So Dylan has an extension on that. Is like, are you doing any automation here while you're fixing that muddiness to deal with like bleed during the recording and how it deals with the compensation of the samples that you're using?
No, I'm not doing any. Be honest with you, in my mixes, I get a balance on the drums. I don't even touch them. Okay, I get a balance on the drums and they stay there. I occasionally, right, will ride a tom fill or duck a room track out to make the verse like tighter. It's more creative moves. But here's the things you do, okay? If you don't compress the bejesus out of the snare, you're not going to get a ton of hi-hat. And if you cut away all the toms, so it's just the toms and no cymbals, that solves the problem, right? Then you add your samples to help give you what you're missing. Are you missing a room sound? Put a room sample in there. Is the snare drum the wrong pitch or just not cutting it? Then find one that works, right? I'm not showing you all the samples. I'm just showing a couple of samples that I use. So I'll record my own drum samples. And that's what I recommend all you do. When you're tracking drums and producing a record or working on a record, every time you record drums, make some samples of those drums if you like what you're doing. And then you'll start to have a collection, say, hey, give me that one from, give me the Keltner, give me the Beefer, or whatever you want to name them. Give me the God Snare, the Death Kick, or whatever nickname you have for it. And then add those in and automatically it's like, wow, it's coming together.
So one of the things I know about you, because you and I have been working together for a heck of a long time, is you mix super fast. And one of the things that you've always explained about how you mix so fast is you have a system and you don't mess about. Now, one of the questions that's just come up is from a guy called Chris, who's a newbie. Hey, Chris.
Hey, Chris.
Chris is saying he's been taught to add master track to all sessions. Do you recommend any of your specific plugins to be added to the master track, or is that a no-no?
No. The first thing you do is make sure you have a bus. Make sure you have a bus limiter. Make sure you have a sound on the mix bus. And what do I have? Ta-da, the mix down. Okay, so look, this, and I had the EQ out because this is already mixed, right? Find what you're going to use in your mix bus. And the mix down is, look, I'm not trying to sell my plugins, okay? But I'm just showing you that this is my mix bus. Put it on your master fader or your aux or whatever you're going to use for the finish line and start there. Start with the sound of the finished mix. And then all of a sudden, this one compressor does all the work. You don't need to compress the drums. You don't need to compress the guitars, okay? The interaction between the drums, between the band makes this all work. I mean, I think a lot of people start to forget that mixing is making the song work and make it exciting, and they do so much extra work to undo the mix.
So, and this brings up another question. Somebody else, Amir, is asking how to use EQ and compression on a master bus. You're actually using, as you said before, you're using your own plugins and you're using this specific plugin Mixdown. Can we go through, I mean, obviously, can you just show, you've actually added some really solid presets to your plugins that are huge help for people who are just starting out.
Sure. So, I mean, look, if you wanted me to show you on what plugin you want me to
Whichever one you want.
Look, on the mix down, okay, this is funny. On the mix down, it's always start me up is my start point, and then full reset. So where is the list? Okay, so
got to load.
Oh, okay. Sorry. I come up with funny names, don't I? Mr. Squeeze, Mr. Squeeze. Whoa. Okay. Anyway, turn him on, right? Mr. Squeeze. Yeah, right. Okay.
But these are really good starting points for people. I mean, that's one of the things I love about presets, and one of the things you mentioned earlier is you can't break it. All you have to do if you don't like it is press undo. But these are amazing.
Every one of my plugins has a start me up plugin, and that's where you should start up. So if you look at Mix Hub, right? Look, even on the Mix Hub, look how many presets you got there. Okay, I literally gave you drum EQs, percussion. You know, I put cowbell on there, right? Vocals. Look at this.
And also look at all the other artists that supported you on it and who use.
Whoa! Look at these. I know these guys.
You know?
Oh, Ross Hogarth, man, that guy's really good. Right, Richard Cheek. Wow, these guys. These are pros, man. Oh, Greg Wells. Well, I bow down to the mighty. You know, this guy's a talented guy. I'll tell you. Dave Darlington, come on, you guys. Well, you know what? It's funny. I never looked at the list. But wow, I feel honored to have all this talent helping me out here. Greg Wells is an amazing guy. But look, start me up is the start points. Let's look at the 76, right? Hey, Greg Price, look at that. Look, Greg Wells lead vocal. Blue East. It's always the start me up, right? That's a little bit lower because I wanted a little bit more. But look, it's super easy. Their tools are made for that reason.
All right, beautiful. So let's move on. Let's go through a section. We've talked about the lead vocals. We've talked a bit about the drums. What's next in this section? Because I'm digging this song.
Let's just look at these guitars. I just, I didn't want to bother you like bass. I just want to make sure these are muted. Okay, so I think we're just mute my kick here. Sorry. With guitars, okay, let's just see what the guitars sound like. All right. Now, I'll probably just add a little mix hub, just show you what it can be done. Always having that first, right? So let's just see what these guys sound like, all right from here. Okay. All right, and then, right. Now, you're like, wow, Chris, plus 15 at 8K. And what am I using as the compressor? The old standby. I love when it's on a regular number. So I'll just option that down. Now these might be a little hot.
A bit. Just a bit.
So let's just bring them down. Let's just clip gain them down. Just a few, right? But this is a typical setting for me right here. Look. Well, listen to the difference. I mean, look, everyone's always saying, oh, do you scoop or do you, or just get both of these up here. Oh. Sorry.
I would just like to point out to the world that one of the most legendary mix engineers and producers is actually apologizing to us right now, which is ridiculous.
Because I'm so focused on driving with this DAW right here, I have to eventually be good at this guy right here that you're all experts at the Pro Tools. I don't let it drive the race. So look how simple it is with heavy guitars. Okay. By the time you get to the mix and you started making everything super shiny, what's wrong with 15 dB at 8K? Okay. Whoa. certainly better than the option here, which is dark. I don't, when it comes to guitars, it's like I add shine and that's it. Occasionally, if it's really not happening in the mid-range, I'll add some mid-range. But with the plugin, if I can just add a big treble knob, that's all I need. I'm not taking any bottom out. The whole energy of the record is that, you know what I mean, is that right there. So don't roll, oh, I got to make room for the bass. Let me do this. Why? I want it to be thunderous. So you know, I try to just be simple about it and think about mixing as if I only had bass and treble. That's how I try to look at it.
We actually have while we're talking about thunderous, we have a question here from Braden, who says, with albums like American Idiot, 21st Century Breakdown, and Black Parade, how much of that signature vibe was already there when you received the songs, and how much was created during the mix? Could you, was there a more special album amongst these? And that seemed like a good place to ask this question while you're talking about thunderous.
This is a good response to this question. This is a great question, okay? And every single one of you out there, I'm going to tell you this once, okay? This is, stop documenting. Be engineers. Make a mistake. You know why American Idiot sounds amazing? Because they went in and actually got sounds. They spent days getting guitar sounds and drum sounds, okay? They actually EQ'd it. So when you throw the tape up flat, it's like pretty freaking great. So instead of like just, oh, I'm going to be careful, flat kick, flat, I'll deal with it later. No. Make it so when you throw the faders up in Pro Tools, okay, you got a drum sound that kicks butt, all right? Make the mistake, over EQ, okay? Learn that way. Stop making records that have nothing on them. Stop making records that have no engineering, okay? We can all just take our cameras. We can take our phone, okay? Take a picture. Great. That doesn't do me any good. Engineer. You all have ideas on what you want it to sound like. Don't be afraid to make a mistake. EQ it. That's why those records sound good. You know why? Because Rob Cavallo and Green Day went in there and said, we're making this record sound a certain way. We're going to make it sound great. We're going to tune the drums. We're going to EQ them. The only way you know if the drums are good is so you EQ them to the point where, wow, that tom doesn't sound right. Let's try to tune it. Oh, that snare, let's pick a different snare. Or that kick, wow, the kick sucks. Let's use a different kick, because you're adding all this EQ and you're seeing the rattle and the crap. At the time, I'm bringing up EQ on guitar tracks and go, what were you guys thinking with the multi-mic?
One of the questions, while we're talking about that, one of the questions is, Marcus just asked, how did you get Billy Talent's bass to sound so good with the guitar? So how did you?
Well, first of all, I love Billy Talent, and I'm actually working on their new stuff as we speak. Great band. I've done almost everything they've recorded, at least tried to. And they have a new song out doing very well. Here's how it is. His style of playing, okay, it's very mid-rangey. It's very lower mid-range, right? So I don't scoop it, okay? I add the frequencies that you guys take out. So I literally take the DI and the amp and add some mid-range, some like 400 and 1K, and not add low end or super top end. And then just put it forward, okay? And let it be that way. But, a lot of it is in the player too.
I mean, generally speaking, I think you, from what I've learned from you, you're very, very brave in your mixes, and you're very, very forward about, okay, so I'm going to commit to this and I'm going to put it out there. I think the biggest word you used was thunderous. There's a lot of people right now who are asking one question that's come up quite a lot from multiple people, and I'll use Jordan's. Hi, Jordan, as an example. Big J. So is the way you mix, is it relevant to all genres of music? I mean, a lot of people here are doing electronic-based music, but I think it is really, isn't it? The way these explanations work for pretty much anything.
Exactly. I mix everything. I mix pop, EDM with Cruella. From Bublé to freaking Heavy Cookie Monster in one day, I remember it was Bublé and then like In Flames. I mean, it doesn't matter. The same headspace is in the same place. Clarity, aggression, it all works, right? Now you may tone it down, but a lot of what we're trying to do here is a lot of you are building these records. A lot of you are engineering. So if you build it in, so when you throw the faders up, it's kind of sounded like a record. Isn't that the job anyway?
So how, what point is it with you, Chris, when you're mixing and you think, okay, I've given them, my ears are bleeding on this track now. I mean, how long is it before you walk away and give yourself a rest before, and go work on something else?
You know what? I don't rest. I just get it done. I literally, once I start, my head is just focused on the song. I hear the finish line. I get it done. I take it to the car. I check it, and then I'm good. You know, because I've done this so much, I find that you can't stop and walk away. Once I start, I do it all in one. I automate it all in one pass. Okay, and then the second pass, I fine tune. Go out to the car, check it. Boom. I don't stop. Like once I start, I don't stop until it's done. Okay. Now, the only time I will stop is if it's missing parts. And then I shoot the person that left them out. Kidding. No, that's the only time I stop. I mean, as if it's like, oh, you call the artist, we're missing something. But no, I find that the worst thing is to stop, you know.
So another question here. We've got a question from Red. G'day, Red.
Red.
Red wrote this all in caps, so I think he's yelling at us. Earlier, you mentioned that you use plugins in every mix. When or do you still use your own rack gear and external gear on your tracks?
I use whatever I need. I mean, I'll put the mix hub across every track, okay? And just to have. Now, sometimes I'm not even using it. Maybe I'm just using it for the line sound, but I have it across ready track, ready to go. But I use what I have. I use a combination of everything. I'm a painter, right? So I'm using these little bit of this paint, little digital paint, little analog paint, analog reverb, digital reverb. So it's like if the outboard stuff isn't cutting it, I use the plugins. The combination of the two. Look at what you do as being a painter that has a huge palette of paints in all a variety of spectrums, and that's why I use it all. Sometimes this works better than the other. So it's the song dictates it.
So while we're talking about that, there's obviously a lot of people right now who are stuck at home or stuck in their offices like my space or, a mile away from your place and your place. What's a piece of advice for them to try and kind of like expand and improve other than watching webinars and listening to people like you? It's like there's got to be, to me, people have to be brave and really try and break stuff and really take risks with their music. What do you say to how they can expand and become basically more like you?
Well, I mean, the whole stay at home, the whole, shelter at home, is that what's going on?
Kill me, right?
The whole shelter at home thing, it's like, use that time to say, okay, this is what I have. Let me focus on that and not focus on what I don't have. Okay. So I'm going to contact my artists. I'm going to contact my clients. I'm going to see what I can do to expand. How can I improve my rig? Do I need to climb behind the rack and rewire it? Do I need to get my speakers more set up? Do I need to take a mix I've already done? Let me just look at this again and compare my car. Maximize what you had. When I started, it was a basement, okay, with some crappy speakers, and I was just happy to notch it up every chance I could. And just because you see all this stuff, the really important thing is these two guys and being able to have a limited amount of tools. I mean, that's what it is. So use that time to make the most of it. But the most thing is like engineer, make the record sound good. So when people get your files, it's like, wow, I put this up. It's freaking mixes itself. Isn't that what we're supposed to do anyway?
Pretty much. So, and that leads me on to another question, which I'm glad somebody asked. Douglas and Tommaso, g'day guys, you pretty much asked the same thing. What's your feeling about a lot of people, obviously, they're in spaces where they have to mix in these things in headphones. Is that a possibility? Tough. I mean, it's hard, but I mean, is it possible? Because a lot of people don't have anything else but these.
You got to use the tools you have. I mean, look, I can't mix in headphones. I mean, I could listen in headphones if I have to. Look, if I only had headphones, I would adapt, right? Right now, we're in a world we have to adapt, right? We have to adapt to a lot of things. So if headphones make you happy, then do that. But really, getting a pair of speakers for some reason is what I'm used to, and I recommend it. Okay, I recommend finding that, using this time to expand a little bit and try to find that. But listen to the records that you think sound great, that you appeal to you. Everyone has their different choices, right? listen to those CDs, listen to however you can listen to it, and then try to think about what they're doing and see if what you're doing compares to it. Okay. If you like what a Muse record sounds like, if you like what an Audio Slave record, if you like what a pop record sounds like, or Serbian mix, then A/B those and compare them and find some speakers that it will make you happy. I mean, that's the time where you can be doing this.
So one guy is asking, Josh is asking, how do you keep levels consistent for each song on a record? Is that something that you do, or is that something that you let the mastering engineer do?
Well, I mean, the simplest way, if when I send files to clients, okay, my mixes may be off a dB here, a dB there. It depends on how far I push the mix and how maybe it went a couple dB louder than the last song or a dB under or whatever. I literally just edit the file, make it 2 seconds before the song starts, and just normalize it and just upload it normalized. So it's within the ballpark. To make a whole record normalizing, that's mastering. Okay. I don't want to do the mastering. I send it off to people that all they do is 1 dB here, a half a dB there. Okay. Mastering isn't just like compress it, EQ it, move on. Here's
a question that you've heard a lot, but there's so many people out there who are new to this.
Mate.
It's you're killing me. Ray, g'day, Ray. Ray
G'day.
wants to know. Ray wants to know how you know when I'm losing it. Ray wants to know, how do you know when you finished a mix?
To me, it's like a puzzle. When I put the last piece in, I said, "Oh, I look at the picture, I see everything I want." I'm confident when I do, and when I hear it finished the way I like it, it's easy. Usually, I just once I have a track and I make sure the vocals sit right, I know it's finished when the client approves it. That's the best answer.
Yeah, that's pretty much
everyone
it.
Everyone has their own way of being confident with it.
I'm going to take one last question on this, and then I'm going to ask you a question so we can listen to a bit more music before we close up. Dylan wants to know, when using an SSL compressor on your mix bus and also SSLs on your track stacks on drums or acoustic guitars, does it really matter how much of the SSL plugin is on a channel group and your mix bus, or can you ever use too much SSL as in the plugins? Or I think that's what his question was anyway.
Look, I mean, it all depends on if it's making the song work for you. There's no rules. When I first started out and saw Bob Clearmountain mixing on an SSL and saw the mix compressor in there and heard the way it sounded, I was like, wow, that's unbelievable. Let me try that. So everyone has their own approach on how much they want to use. But for me, my philosophy is use it till it gets to that sweet spot for you. I mean, there's never too much, There's never too much because it's all dependent on the song.
That's pretty true. And Alex, this is relevant before we move on for the last few minutes. Do you can you explain your print rig? Do you print back into the same Pro Tools session or to another machine, or what's your system when it comes to delivering the end product where it needs to go?
You got an answer for that? Are you going to talk to me today? God, this guy is like so quiet today. Okay, for most of you,
never thought I'd hear you say that you were quiet.
Anyway. Here's the answer to that. Most of you have one rig, okay? Most of my files show up and they're 48K, 24-bit. That's my multi-track default, right? And since my console's analog, once I add some EQ, automatically it's bigger. So I have a separate rig, 9624 Apogee Symphony 2s with the special extra card that they have, the high-end audio card for my 2 tracks. So that's in sync, hopefully most of the time. So the multi-track rig, 4824, and then the 96, they're locked together. But I print the same mixes on the 48-track rig and the same mixes on the 96K rig, just to have them both, okay? And that's how we do it. Now, if you're only using one computer and going 96K on all your stuff, well, you build it right, and it's actually easier and quicker probably. So everything's in sync with the session, and off it goes. So it's pretty simple.
So, Chris, You've designed some amazing plugins with us over the years, and thank you. And I think everybody on this webinar who's watching is thanking you. A piece of advice, it's like, obviously, we're looking at the Mix Hub right now, which is awesome. If somebody is going to put Mix down, for example, on their master bus, what's the best way for them to start? Is Start Me Up the place to start? Or just take us through that before we close out, and so we can hear a bit more of the music and really hear how to finish a track with this plugin.
All right, let me just show you what it's doing. Okay, I'm going to play the song through it. All right, I'm going to give you a little walkthrough. Make sure these guitars are off, or it's going to be a lot of guitars. I think we're good here.
You can feel it in yourself. It's your life. That's all it's all.
And they're not off. Ha ha ha! I like that. That was funny. I knew it. Anyway, now this song's already mixed. It's already been compressed, so this is going to be just added. So playing bypass, that's how it was. But even adding it to an existing mix, here's your Start Me Up setting. Okay, while brighter, like a nice treble control, right? So here's just EQ. So big round EQ, and then feeding in flavor number 2. Starts to hammer it. Uh-oh. He's getting pummeled. He's gonna go down the drain now. A little more drive. Okay. I mean, we can grind it into a non-dynamic, super loud track, or go back to clean. It's not really very destructive. I tried to build this so when you go to Start Me Up, okay, it's exactly how it sounds on my mix bus. So if you're go here, play it here. So if you use the gain plugin, this is a little secret, right? Let's invert it and just check the level of that. Okay, it's -6. That's about right. So it's about -6, and you play it. Okay, you're gonna get. Come on. Oops, sorry. Between 2 and 3 dB of compression is exactly what my mix bus is. So this is a great start point. So if you're moving right in this range, it's the sweet spot. All this additional glue is going to give you more compression. Drive is going to give you more limiting, more flattening it, right? And it's going to be more distorted. And you have flavor 1 and flavor 2, okay? So it's pretty simple device. So I find that anytime I'm in this mode right here, so this is the first thing it's on. I put it on no matter what. And have it as my start point. So a little walkthrough with the.
There's a lot of people on here asking about how you get that amazing bass in this mix, for example. You got time to go into that? It's like okay. This is an easy one. Okay, this is an easy one. Okay, I don't know what it is, but bass and then bass amp and then distortion and then sub or look. Only Howard Benson and Mike Plotnikoff get the bass DI, the bass amp, the bass distortion, and the sub to be in phase and usable, okay? For some reason, every time I get a DI and an amp, it's like, you know what? This is not working. Just give me the DI pure. I'll use a Sans amp on it or a little bit of the mix hub on it, an 1176, which is this right here, okay? In this mode like that, and push it forward, okay? And that's what does it. And all I do is add top end. Don't start screwing the low end. Every time you start adding 100 hertz, that note sticks out. That's the problem with bass, okay? Bass guitar, it's like as soon as you add 60 cycles, whatever note 60 cycles is resonating, that E gets louder. So why do that? Just make the whole thing louder, okay? So if the DI is recorded reasonably,
You can use a distortion plugin or something. It just, unless the amp is really done right, it never seems to make the bass sound forward. So that's the answer.
And that's and so a lot of that is actually at the source when it's actually recorded, correct?
Yeah, but even what you get as a mixer or someone who's working on something else, the DI is usually something they don't mess with too much. They maybe make it brighter. So if you just use that as your source, distort it a little bit, overdrive it, whatever, and just add top end and just push it forward, that's going to hold up. Look, and if you want a really distorted bass, make the distorted track just be from like roll off the bottom. So it's only the grit and not the bottom, because as soon as you have these two low ends colliding, then the phase starts to get messed up.
So we have a question here from Rebecca. G'day, Rebecca.
Cheers, mate. Mikey.
All right, hello, Rebecca. How you going?
Your Aussie accent's actually pretty good.
No worries.
She says, hello, Chris. What are your thoughts on diversity in the industry and working towards a more diverse group of mix engineers? Thanks.
Diversity would mean what, though, Rebecca? That's like, what do you mean by diverse? Like diverse, like male, female? I mean, diversity and short people, tall people. I mean,
I'm going to take a stab in the dark
classical.
and say, take kind of like male, female.
Oh, well, look, here's how it works, okay? It doesn't matter whether you're black or white, male or female, tall or short, okay? Have 4 arms or no arms. All that matters is what you create and what you make into music, okay? And I know many, many females, and I taught. Angela Piva was one of the students I taught that became a great engineer. And Erica Glenn, another great artist out there that is a great engineer. There's so many of them that I know, okay? The point is, it doesn't matter who you are, or what gender you are, or anything. It's all about what you can deliver, what's in your head, what's in your ears. And I want more diversity, okay? I want to be diverse to the point where even the honey badger can mix.
The honey badger is always good at mixing. So we've got a question here from Kirill. Tracks that have large orchestral sections and solo orchestral instruments. How do you go about mixing those? Do you treat orchestral instruments the same as you treat like electric guitars? Because obviously you do some really, use your own word, thunderous tracks with some really big rock bands. So you deal with the EQ.
Here's the problem with strings. Let me just tell you the problem with strings. The problem with any live orchestral recordings is leakage. So if you're trying to take instruments and make them poke out, okay, first you have to say, okay, let me clean up all the leakage that's not helping the situation here, and then work from there. If you're trying to make an instrument pop out of an orchestra, okay, you only have EQ. So then you kind of have to find what EQ is that viola in, right? So there's a little bit more of that there. Now, the whole thing with strings is that you compress, you make it ugly, you can make it worse. So with orchestral instruments, a lot of it has to do with overall EQ and then using the EQs that bring up the timbre of a specific instrument to get it to poke through. Almost becomes the only way when it's already in a stereo mix.
So,
and even when it's separate, you have to isolate it, get rid of the leakage, and then make it pop out that way.
So while we're talking about popping, there's a lot of questions on here about 2 things, both of which I want to go into, one straight after the other. The first one is, and Andre, I think I said your name right, Andre, asked it the best. How do you deal, when you're directing a vocalist who sings incredibly low, how do you bring out, I think the best way of asking it, how do you help somebody and direct them to bring out their performance so that it's the best they can possibly be when you're actually working with, like, you can name drop if you want. There's a vocalist I know you're working with right now.
Funny enough you bring up that question. I do have a vocal sheet right here because after this, I'm working with Kiefer Sutherland doing his album, and I have his vocal rig set up right here, and I have my lyric sheet, okay? And this is very easy, okay? This is very easy, okay? You just have to be organized. Have your lyric sheet, let them warm up a little bit. The worst thing you can do with vocals is just keep singing the song over and over again. Oh my God, that's pointless. So I work with my assistant. I keep playlisting after each thing. Focus on sections, okay? Once you get a vocal chain that works for the singer, focus on the first 4 lines of the song. Once they've warmed up, there's no reason to just, hey, let's do 6 takes, I'll make a comp. I hate that. How about I try to convince them, look, let's just focus on 4 lines at a time, 2 lines at a time, okay? Do the 4 lines. Said, you know what? I'll look at my lyric sheet. It's always broken into 4 lines. I'll say, you know, a gentle snow. Can we do line 3 again? Let's just punch in line 3, and then we'll listen. Okay, you know what? Line 3 now sounds better than 1 and 2. Let's do 1 and 2 again, okay? So I think, to answer your question, you have to be positive. You have to have good bedside manner. You have to make it comfortable for them and let them know, look, we're going to look at this. We're looking at this as a function of creation. We're going to build a song, and then we're going to listen back to the whole thing, and we're going to see what we got to patch up.
Okay, so now that we've done that, and that's great advice, because I mean, otherwise you can dig yourself into a hole, as you've said many times on stage. So there's a lot of people on here who are saying, listen, we're not mixing and recording and mixing in a room that's as acoustically treated as yours. Well, that's what I was going to say. I mean, give us your opinion on that, because obviously you have some plugins that literally put you over their shoulder, and it doesn't really matter the room in a lot of cases, does it?
The room doesn't matter. Here's what happens. The only way the room matters is if you start turning it up loud. When you start cranking it, then the room starts to show you that it's not good. So if you listen quietly, you can get away with this anywhere, okay? And if you're having problems with your room, you know, it's all about mic stands and blankets, okay? So if you want to deaden it, just mic stands and blankets, okay? You're doing vocals. You can't go wrong if it's dead, but you can't undo if it's too live, right? So you have to monitor quiet. So you have to be creative, okay? If you're in a bedroom, if you're in a situation that's loud and noisy, mic stands and blankets, pillows, whatever you have to use. But listening at low volume will help you.
Well, absolutely. It's like, I mean, especially when it comes to bass and reactions on bass. So there's some of your plugins that we haven't even touched yet, but I thought you might want to bring them up. Is your artist signature series. So if you want to show any of those, because obviously you've got your CLA guitars, which I use a ton. And you know, a lot of those kind of plugins, which are literally you over somebody's shoulder. So it's worth talking about.
Okay, yeah.
I think you'll find them under effect.
Thank you. There we go. Come on. All right. So I'll start by showing you the CLA drums. I'm going to walk you through these really quickly, okay, to show you that there's a common thread. CLA drums, okay, sliders, okay, EQs, EQs, bass, treble, 3 just presets for each one, okay? And then some presets, even a cowbell preset, right? So here, kick preset, snare preset, toms, okay, or just cowbell, right? And then if we go through to the next one and here, so we go to CLA bass, looks like a bass amp. So the same thing, except you got 6 sliders, bass, treble, compress, always the first 3. Then I added a sub. So I emulate having a subwoofer here. And then you want the distortion. This is good. Okay. If you want some chorusing like Pino Palladino or something cool like that, you have it. So so with my mix down, very simple. When you start here, okay, look, start me up, boom, or you stay full reset. Boom, okay. Let's walk through the next one, which would be CLA guitars. Same thing, bass, treble, compressed. Now here I have 3 different reverbs. I have 3 different time-based delays. You know, edge, we all know what that means, dotted eighth. I'm just going to call him, hey, you know what? Dotted eighth, how you doing? Okay, you play pretty good. I'm just going to call you dotted eighth. Edge, it's too boring. Dotted eighth. Okay, anyway, and then quarter. And then we have some pitch, right? And then on this, the difference is we have a reamp section, so you can get 3 different presets of guitar sounds I like, right? But this is like my go-to to I slap this right like this on a guitar solo, and boom, it's like Van Halen. It's got a vibe, right?
I love this plugin because
It's
it literally,
super easy.
yeah, you could take an acoustic guitar and turn it into a big, huge, thunderous electric guitar in just 2 steps.
Yes, I try to make it easy for you guys, right? And girls, right? And then look, vocals. Now I've heard Max Martin actually uses this. Well, Max, if you're watching, thank you. Same thing, bass, treble, compress, reverb, delay, pitch. So when you open the plugin, it's like, oh, it's always the same layout, right? I try to keep it simple. So the GUI to me is not like confusing. And even unplugged, which is kind of like your acoustic instrument one, bass, treble, compress, and 2 reverbs and delay. So it's kind of psychedelic.
The thing I love about these plugins, Chris, is it really is literally like having you behind somebody's shoulder telling them what to do to make them sound good. And that's the thing I love about them.
I like the one. Well, thank you, Michael. I appreciate the kudos on this. I tried to make them, when this whole thing started, I just tried to make, with the signature one, simple, all in one. If you only have these, you're good. You can just have these plugins and you're good to go. So like even the effects one, get the fireworks on it. It gives you distortion and EQ and the ultimate telephone vocal effect and reverbs and delays and pitch and even a way to throw them and automate it. Look, I try to make it easy. Look, I have friends all over the world that are stuck. I have wonderful friends in Italy. Italy got hit the hardest. Friends in Milan. I have a friend in Rome. She's been stuck in lockdown for 6 weeks in Ciampino. So Valentina, I know it, miss you so much. And all my friends in Milan and Switzerland, it's like, this is a bitter pill. Okay. And it's making it so our live, to actually see me in person at a place is a little challenging right now, isn't it? Because of all the laws, we can't really travel. I'm so used to being in the airport once a week. And now American Airlines is saying, hey, do you know this guy? I haven't seen him for a while. We got a seat for him on this flight, but I like to travel and I like to, see you guys in person around the world. But here's the next best thing. I'm on camera annoying you from my home base, showing you my plugins. But, I want to give my shout outs to my friends in Colombia, my friends in Argentina, and Brazil, okay, all over the world, in Australia.
No worries.
And England and Switzerland and Italy, Germany, Austria, and
fair dinkum
in Australia, and
straight
in Australia.
You're killing me. So, Chris,
anyway, in New York City, Nashville, everywhere else. Go ahead.
So as you just pointed out, we are all stuck. There's a lot of social distancing going on now. We do really appreciate your time. For all of the beginners out there and the people who are trying to aspire to be where you are at your end of the career, if there was one piece of advice that you would give them before we close out, what do you think it would be?
My best advice for you is to take the records that you love and use them as templates for what you want to create, okay? And take this career seriously. So every tool that you buy, consider it as an investment in your future and not consider this a hobby. Consider this your life. I've been at it since I was 13 and I'm not done yet.
Chris, Lord-Alge, Waves, thanks to you. There's at least 9,000 odd people out there who have been watching who thank you. Until we see you next time, thanks so much, and thank you to everybody who's been watching this. This has been a Waves Open session. Thank you all very, very much. Closing out. Cheers.
Thanks for having me. See you next time.